Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Let's begin by going around and introduce ourselves. I'm Larry. Douglas.
George.
Howard. Scott.
Marty. Paul. Roy. Roger. Ed. Jim.
Clint. Dave. David.
Peter. Mark. Bob. Michael.
Snake.
Bill. Dave. Diana. Elrod. Is here to speak on some more possible distinguishing features of Nichiren Buddhism.
Woohoo. Thank you. First, I owe you an apology for May 30th. I heard I was exonerated, but that was the festival of the mission, and I couldn't get within 300 miles of here, and they had a carload of people to bring. So we went back to my house, and we chanted for everybody's happiness here. So I hope you felt that, nothing else. Then we went and had a lot of coffee, and then we felt really great. Because it was Pete's, and I'm a Pete's freak.
Is that one of the distinguishing features?
It is. You're so very right. I think 95% of you folks look familiar to me, and there are a few that don't. If you've never, hi, how are you? There's the Jims and the Peters and the Davids and the Michaels, and they're milling about. And introduce yourself to them if you have a moment. And I don't want to repeat a lot of things that I've said before, obviously, but there's always so much to say. And many of you may know, I mentioned that I went back to school, and partly because I felt bereft of a clearer understanding of the context in which Nichiren Buddhism developed. I personally had practiced Zen meditation prior to starting to chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which is the principal practice of Nichiren Buddhism. But I didn't know very much about it. I didn't know much about Zen, and I really didn't know sort of the history of Buddhism. So I was accepted to a PhD program at the California Institute of Integral Studies and taking classes there. And this thing called the 14 Possible Distinguishing Features of Nichiren Buddhism, which we can go into some detail about if you're interested, but leave it up to you to read it. I'm just trying to find a way to describe. So many times I've either come to this meeting or to another meeting, and people say, well, that, what you're saying sounds like what I believe, and what you're saying sounds like, what I practice or what I understand thus and such form of Buddhism to espouse. And so I thought, well, what is it to me that I can really, this is sort of my own journey about what I get out of Nichiren Buddhism and as a collection of things. A lot of people will read things in here and say, wow, that's exactly what I think. And what I'm trying to do as I go through this process of being in school is to really form and reform and shape and reshape this sort of package, if you will, of what makes Nichiren Buddhism kind of different from principally a doctrinal point of view, which a lot of people don't really care about. So that's why we won't go into a lot of it if you are not interested. But I wanted to share a little bit about some of the things that I've been learning, because I think probably a lot of you will resonate with them. And I really have come to see Nichiren, who is a Japanese monk practicing in 13th century Japan, as really a product of, as I think all forms of Buddhism are, a product of a combination of culture and the philosophical teachings that preceded him. And specifically, a lot of what he talks about, even though he's from Japan, was really very Confucianism. There's probably a lot of Taoism in what he espoused. And a lot of, he in fact references people, for example, primarily other forms of Buddhism operating in China and Japan, like Tiantai Buddhism was, the great teacher Dengyo was an important person in his life, as well as he speaks a lot about Confucius and how important Confucius was to him. And he took as his personal mentors a number of living and dead philosophers. I won't necessarily call them religious leaders because he was looking at them as people, not as leaders of religious organizations. And so in trying to take these 14 things that are sort of dry and boring to some people and distill them into four. I'm getting shorter and shorter. Pretty soon I'm going to come up with the one essential truth. And then I'll make a lot of money. But I got it down to 4, and the 4 are these that I think are really what Nichiren Daishonin was really trying to bring was, number one, he really emphasized essence over formality. And he was extremely devoted to people's happiness in a way that did not require of them huge sacrifices in time, or he didn't espouse a ritual that they had to undertake. He just had this kind of this real focus on what's most important here, and the most important thing to him was the mystic law. It wasn't people. It wasn't people in the sense of following a person. It was really find out for yourself what was important to you and become a person of great integrity. The second thing is that he believed in the absolute equality of every living being, principally people, but also all living beings. And by that, he really focused his efforts a lot on people who were average, everyday people. He wrote letters. A lot of his letters in the original language in which they were written in basically a form of Japanese that was geared towards women. He made a personal vow to help women become enlightened, or to achieve enlightenment, or if you prefer, awaken to their own enlightenment. And so a lot of his writings are in either the sort of slang, if you will, of the day, or were focused on helping the average person on the street find happiness in this pretty awful world called Japan in the 13th century. This was a time when the Mongols were invading from Central Asia. There was a lot of strife. The government of Japan was executing people left and right for various perceived or real offenses they thought of the government. The government, even at that time, even though they were, it was a very militaristic government, they did have a lot of practices that were, I don't know if you could call them religion or ritualistic in some way, and people who didn't follow the government were executed. In fact, three of Nichiren's most important followers were executed, were beheaded for believing in the Lotus Sutra, which is the primary text of Nichiren's teaching. And as a consequence, one of the things Nichiren did, he dedicated much of his later writings to these 3 fishermen. The third thing was that Nichiren articulated a practice that every single person could accomplish. Chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is pretty easy. It's a phrase you can say at any time. You don't have to be sitting anywhere. It's ideal. Obviously, we all have sort of rituals to help us focus and do things. But the teaching was Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which is an invocation of the mystic law. The fact that Nichiren would come up with something, I don't think he came up with something like he was sitting around smoking, cigars late at night thinking, I wonder what I could. He came to an enlightened state where he realized this is the true meaning of life. It is life. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is life. It is the Buddha. If you want, you can also. It is the concept of Zen. It's Tao. It's everything that sort of it's sort of the thing that puts it all together, that makes us here and makes this happen, and it's the universal life force, if you will. And to create a practice that absolutely every person could do, no matter how idiotic they may have been, this was fundamentally different than a lot of the forms of Buddhism that were in operation in Japan at the time specifically, which required you to be pretty wealthy and have a lot of time on your hands and do stuff like meditate for 15 hours a day. This is not the average person could do that. The last thing I wanted to say was that Nichiren really advocated cutting out the middleman. And what I mean by that is Nichiren was very clear and in fact, the idea of having a priesthood dedicated to carrying on Nichiren's teachings was somewhat antithetical to Nichiren's teachings. He really said, rely on the law, not upon persons. The law is most important. And by that he meant the law within you. You are the ultimate authority for your happiness, for your enlightenment, and that no one can ever tell you that. And unfortunately, like many religions, great religions throughout history, people tend to, I think it's human nature for people to really start deferring to something, a spiritual authority outside of themselves to help us figure out our lives. And the same thing happened with Nichiren Buddhism. There's a lot of conflict between various priests who were established to carry on Nichiren's teachings after he died. And there are a number of Nichiren sects out there that particular one that was associated with the organization that I belong to, which is not connected with the priesthood anymore. It was called Nichiren Shoshu. It's still in existence. It's relatively small compared to the organization SGI USA, which is it's an international lay organization. The high priest put himself in a position of, and I've read many of his writings saying basically that only the high priest can grant you in your enlightenment. Only the high priest has the answers. Only the high priest received the heritage of the ultimate law of life. We don't believe that. We believe that it's everybody who says, I want to do something with my life. They've inherited that principle. So Nichiren, these were the four things, and I think that when Nichiren kind of brought these concepts into the world, it was kind of no small wonder that he would be horribly persecuted by the government. He was basically teaching, if you will, to use a Christian analogy, teaching people how to fish rather than just giving them fish. He taught them how to fish. He taught them how to live a life of meaning and happiness. Happiness regardless of external circumstances. But distilling these four things, I realized that these four things, emphasizing essence over formality, believing in the absolute equality of all beings, articulated a practice, and advocating cutting out the middleman, these are the four things that I find are the most difficult aspects of my own personal practice. For example, I have to constantly remind myself, what is the practice? Okay, is it really sitting? Is it lighting candles? Is it reciting these prayers and doing this, or is it having a feeling? I mean, it's a constant question that I have to ask myself. What is this practice? What is the essence of what Nichiren was trying to say? Is it how I relate to other people? Is it how I grow myself? It is all of these things. Is it none of these things? I had a person, a senior leader in the organization, say she'd been practicing a really long time for a period of time during which, especially in the United States, it was all about the form. It was all about the ritual. And she said, we have offerings on our altars. We don't have Buddha's statues. It's about practicing to a concept or a law, not to a person or a representation of a thing. So we chant to a scroll, and I brought one of them here called a Gohonzon, and it's the enlightened principle of life is depicted on this scroll. So we chanted that, and basically everything else is sort of superfluous. But she said, this leader said, well, you can't have cut flowers on your altar. This is not done. You have to have greens. It has to be greens, and they can't be in dirt because the dirt is, it's dirty. So, and I was like, oh, really? And the candles have to be white. So we have purple candles in our house, and we have orange candles, and we have cut flowers, and we have all sorts of cool things. We have things in dirt. That was a ritual that was established to help people learn, but people didn't ever get beyond the ritual and thought that the ritual was really the practice. So this is, from my own view, is always cutting away at, what am I trying to share with people that is the essence of the teaching? How can I get at the essence of the teaching and cut out the ritual? Because it's important but not fundamental. The second thing is I always have to struggle with ways in which I judge other people, including myself. And, if Nichiren believed in the absolute equality of every living being, I don't necessarily live my life that way. I don't know about you, but I can tell you for sure that on times on the freeway when some idiot is in the slow lane, I would be happy to deny their having a Buddha nature. I would pretty much assume there wasn't anything there anyway. So this is constant. I mean, there's no way to not. Every time I'm going through this very difficult time with my parents right now, and I'm really the struggle to just flip into here's the list of everything wrong with them is very great. I mean, it's a very strong negative pull, but it is a pull, and it feels delicious at 3 o'clock in the morning to think of all these things. And I have to, say, I don't want to be doing that. The third thing when I talk about articulating a practice that every single person could accomplish, this is not, many people have, through history, I'll say, not just in the current world, have really denigrated chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo because it is so simple. But saying that it's simple doesn't mean that the benefit of doing it is simple, or the effort required of all the stuff that comes up because you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, that doesn't make it simple. But the fact that anybody can do it, you can do it in your car, you could, people think, it can't be, it's just not hard enough. Well, I can tell you after 10 years of practicing Buddhism, it's getting increasingly more difficult because I'm getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into my life and uprooting things that I didn't realize I had. And that to me is what makes it so difficult. In fact, the Lotus Sutra predicted the difficulty of not chanting because it wasn't described in the Lotus Sutra, but is saying, to accept the Lotus Sutra and the Lotus Sutra's teaching is easy, but to continue is difficult. I mean, this is, there's a lot of stuff that goes on when you chant. A lot of stuff comes up, and I see things that I've never been able to see before in my life, not through, 20 years of therapy. Stuff that is really hard to understand and hard to not say, I don't want to chant about that anymore because I'm really, I'm over it. But it's very, it's simple and yet not. Isn't that interesting? And then fourth, advocated cutting out the middleman. Even if people really understand that, you don't need a spiritual intermediary, there are a lot of people, though, that I find myself I defer to. I will find somebody that I realize, for example, my parents. This whole experience with my parents visiting for 4 hellish days. And they stayed with me, and I will never have them back again because I have to, I have to create a boundary with them, okay? But I realize that I have all of my life, even though I've gone so far with therapy, I've really worked a lot on myself and my Buddhist practice to really understand and have appreciation for my parents. I held out a tiny shred of hope that they were going to fix it for me, whatever it is. That there was like 99.99999% I was sure that my parents, I was really about my life and how I was going to do, but I held out this little iota of thought that somehow they had something that they could give me that I needed to make myself feel better. And that illusion was completely destroyed this weekend. And I can't tell you how painful that was. That was so devastating to me because it was like when I first started chanting, I had considered myself an atheist in the sense of I didn't believe a God outside. But I realized after chanting maybe a year that I held out this one iota of hope that there might possibly be a God, and I wanted to leave my foot in the door just in case. And when I realized that there wasn't this God outside, that it was basically my personal responsibility 100% for what I made of my life, no matter what had happened to me or what does happen to me in the future, or I do, it's all about me. That was like, it was like the abyss. You know, did anybody see that movie? Going over the cliff into this like nothingness, the void, as it were. It felt like that to me because I felt like, oh shit, I am really alone. And that feeling to me was both terrifying and empowering because it meant there was a lot to do in it, but it also meant that I had to stop blaming my circumstances and other people and this thing, because whatever, for the things that didn't happen in my life. And I think, taking responsibility for yourself is probably 100% is not really that fun. I mean, there's a really good aspect about it. I've done more things in my life because I've taken responsibility for myself than I ever imagined possible, but at the same time, it's not easy. So, I think there's only one book written that ever has tried to explain what enlightenment is, which I've read a little bit of it, and I couldn't get into it, so I stopped reading it. But if there's an enlightened state that you can describe, it's simultaneously feeling the deepest joy and the most despair at the same time. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It's like really getting it and yet feeling, oh, yuck. It's like this kind of like this explosion of thought in your head that you really understand what your life is about. You couldn't really explain it to anybody else, but you could really, for that split second, maybe really, it all came together for you. And I think that, this idea that, not needing somebody else to tell me about myself is, we're always, especially in this environment, we're always looking for a hero to save us. I mean, definitely in our country right now, I certainly am looking for a hero to save us. And I'm not really seeing him or her emerge. But it's natural to go to that, and I think for me, I really am trying to find all the ways that I do that because I really want to be able to be my own authority about everything. I don't want to have the least regret about living my life the way I've lived it. So with that, we have like a half an hour-ish. I'd like to open it up. Is there something here that you want to talk about or have a question about? Each one of these things, the 14 things, has a quote from Nichiren Daishonin, and they're all from basically his letters to his followers. And if there's something in here that you feel particularly offended by, please share it, because maybe we can talk about it. One person got very angry at me at a meeting. It was a meeting for guests at our culture center at 17th Street. She said, number 2, men and women are equal. Are you trying to say that other forms of Buddhism don't say that men and women are equal? And I said, sutra-wise, the Lotus Sutra is the only one that says that men and women are absolutely equal. In fact, men, women, demons, thieves, murderers, and pretty much everything on earth are equal. It's the only one. I have this confirmed from several different sources. And so if there's something in here that doesn't work for you or you have a question about, ask. Yes, dearest.
You said that your deepest intuition was that you were alone. Is that?
Yeah. There's an essential aloneness that comes with being part of everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm still a thing. Kind of like...
because you seem radiantly connected to me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You don't seem like you're in the hell of separation.
It's a different kind of separation than that, I think. I think it was more the hell of feeling like if I'm going to do anything, if anything's going to happen in my life, it's up to me. I think that's really this kind of 100% responsibility. Nobody's going to save me, that kind of aloneness. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in my bedroom crying for hours and hours and hours, feeling horribly, horribly, desperately alone. I had a crazy father, an emotionally twisted mother, and, just feeling so terribly alone. And the aloneness that I felt when I realized there was no God in the sort of traditional somebody out there who looks really great in long white hair and robes to fix it for me, that aloneness was more like, I may be alone, but I'm in charge of fixing it for me. And that's kind of, to me, was ultimately something I didn't want to feel. I'm the queen of fantasy. I like to fantasize about, people rescuing me or me rescuing other people. This is one of my great challenges in life, is to not feel that I have to fix everything for other people or expect them to fix something for me.
Would you recap those 4 elements?
Yes, they are. You're taking notes. Emphasizing essence over formality, believing in the absolute equality of every living being, articulated a practice that every single person could accomplish, and advocating cutting out the middleman. No, they're not in your list. Those are sort of more philosophical constructs of Nichiren Buddhism. I think that a lot of people would identify with these 4 things in their own practice, even if they practice something else, perhaps even Christianity, people who practice Christianity. And the kind of doctrinal foundation feeds into these 4 in a certain way. I don't know how well I would be able to explain that. Yes?
I think I'd like to sort of continue something that Jim said a little bit. My life, of course, is full of wonderful contradictions, and so I'm experiencing a couple of them right now, which is very welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually in my experiencing of you, which is, although I truly believe that I am, of course, responsible for my actions and my way of being in the world, I also feel for myself intimately connected to the whole rest of the universe in a variety of ways, but one way in particular, in which I think, as I go through my day, I see all the possibility of all the teachings around me that I could have access to if I just remained open. What I do with those teachings and how they impact upon me and all that, that's something else. But there's this sense I have that I sort of maybe wander, but at least I'm present. A universe which is constantly opening up the possibility of teachings. They're never hierarchical. They're always, on the same level. They are there. And as a result, I feel all this connectedness to that possibility. I also feel a certain aloneness that has to do with the fact that it's me. I don't know, according to most Buddhist traditions, there is no me here. But there is some, yes there is, there's something that has this form at this particular time that is constantly changing. But there is something there. So anyway, it's that piece that I wanted to ask you about. Because where I often can run into challenges, and that I do daily, is when people really speak to me in a way which makes me have to kind of rethink about what I do. And rather than just react to them, my preferred method is just to hold it so that I don't do anything about it. I just sort of stay present. And if there is some truth there, I trust that it will work its way into me and I will be able to make some use of it or other. But that my reacting to it is a kind of rigidification or solidification of the moment that ultimately does me in. Because then I'm stuck there. And meanwhile, the universe is going on, and I'm stuck back there with whatever that thing is. In a way, it reminds me of this magical moment when I was in the Avery Day Parade, and there were 40 people carrying the flag. And because I'm 6'2", I'm not quite as adept as I used to be to picking up coins that fall on Market Street and continue to hold the flag. Luckily for me, there were 2 19-year-olds right behind me.
Were they cute?
Say again?
Were they cute?
They were cute.
Okay, so
but more importantly, they were flexible. So I turned around and focus on the flexibility. Meanwhile, the flag and the people, and we continued to march. And of course, I managed to march right into one of these huge metal posts where people stand waiting for Muni. And the immediate response of me, my body was, to fall down, roll away, do the things that bodies do. And when some of the people kept saying, "Are you all right?" this sort of rose to me and said, oh yes, this was really good. I'm sure I'm a much more open person right now. Got up and continued to march.
Didn't you say ow? That's what I would have said. My reaction would have been, ow, that hurt.
I wasn't bright enough to do that. I saved my ow for later. And of course there was an ow.
In the emergency room, right?
halfway to the emergency room. But what was interesting to me was that represented for me something. It represented the struggle I had, trying to stay in the flow of things and not get so attached, doing it very intensely. Because of course I wasn't. And it did take, several days for my body to heal up. But the piece for me that I loved was that people ran up. I saw that they cared for me. I saw that I could let go a little bit. And then all the sorrow that arose from me arose later. And that was very reassuring. And it was about connectedness. It was about really all of this connectedness. So,
I think that, one of the things that you said, which is really interesting, Nichiren, one of the 14 distinguishing features is Nichiren really picked up on a concept from Tiantai Buddhism, which was Ichen and Sanzen, which is 3,000 realms in a single life moment. And the number means, there's an explanation of how you get to 3,000, but the essence of it is that at every moment, an infinite number of possibilities are available. And I think that the process of developing our life condition into a place where we can take advantage of that is really one of the benefits has been one of the benefits for me from practicing this Buddhism, because I'm able to see things more clearly and make real choices rather than simply react. I think that in the past, my parents would have come and done their shenanigans, and I would have either reacted by not reacting, which is a reaction, which I hate, or I would have reacted by wanting to screaming at them, literally. And to feel like I have a choice about it. How am I going to choose to react? Seems like, that to me is like a great benefit. Because I don't react to things the way I used to. I really don't. I may get angry. My anger nature has always been my set point. I was very angry. And now I'm in touch with my sadness, which is really interesting. My sadness and sense of, there's a difference between anger and outrage, feeling outrage about something. That is just not right. That's different than, I'm so angry. So it's like, ooh, this is not right. This is injustice. Seeing the injustice of something. But having the choice to act however I want to act, I think is, no matter what happens, is really a benefit from a lot of, for me, a lot of practice, a lot of chanting. I've been chanting a lot every morning lately. I'm kind of lazy. I do, we have morning and evening prayers, and I sometimes am doing them on the way out the door, or, but lately I've been going to a friend's house practically every morning and chanting an hour, and it's such a great feeling, and I see things so differently that way. But I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of contradiction in everything, and slowing things down to the point where you can see how you want to react to something is really, I think, a great benefit. And Clint, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, I just, the thing, you talk about the ultimate 100% personal responsibility and so on. And, the tricky thing with the language is, of course, you use a word that has meaning to you, and I hear that word and it has to mean to me, and I'm not quite sure what you're saying is what I'm interpreting. And I just play around with it. I'm a great strategizer. If I have something I'm not happy with, I'm great at developing strategy for how to overcome this obstacle that doesn't work, to go back to the drawing board and re-strategize and so on. There have been moments in my life where I just couldn't strategize myself out of a very painful situation. And then I've experienced just surrendering. Just say, I can't handle this. I cannot fix this on my own. And just surrendering. And I'm not trying to convince you to see things the way I see them or so on, but I have to reconcile that what you say. What I heard you say was ultimately it's up to us to figure it out. And I wonder whether we're talking about the self of a small s, or the self of a big S,
Both. I think both. I think I actually agree with you. When I say take 100% responsibility, it means basically knowing or determining that the outcome of something will be because of something that I either avail myself to, open myself to, or specifically strategized about. And I have recently come up with situations in which I'm a big strategizer too. I couldn't strategize myself out of a paper bag. I've got work karma coming up that I can't believe that's ever happened to me. And I don't have work, and I'm like freaking out and sitting in front of my altar and chanting and saying, I don't have the answer, I don't have the answer. That to me is also taking responsibility, because it's knowing what you are responsible for or versus not responsible for. I mean, in terms of outcome, or I'll give you an example. What I mean is, a lot of shit happened to me as a kid, and I've carried a lot of that over to me into an adulthood. And whether or not that effect was negative on me, the effect of these bad causes these other people made on me, whether I see them as positive or negative is really up to me. That's taking 100% responsibility. It's determining that no matter what happened to me, I am still a valuable person who creates enormously wonderful things in the world, that I have really great connections, and it's my responsibility to continue that instead of using this as an excuse of why I'm not doing X, Y, or Z.
But it does sound like, though, if I'm understanding you correctly, that there is a certain element of surrender on your part.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't all just like, it's up to me, and I have to figure it out. If I don't figure it out,
Right. No, you're right.
It's like, I mean, like, this is beyond me. I surrender to the chanting process or to the bigger reality.
Or the idea that there's a part of me that the lesser self, which tends to strategize, is getting in the way of the greater self that has this deeper wisdom. And I've had great answers come out of me after long periods of chanting where I've said, I don't have any answers. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Yeah. I mean, I feel a lot like that. I feel a lot lately like, I don't have any answer. What am I doing? And I'm open. Something come out of me, and interesting things happen that way.
Yeah. That's where
I think I agree with you.
When you're open to surrendering to I can't figure this out, then you're right. Then there's often a shift.
But it's surrendering to me. It's surrendering to something deeper within me. One of the other things in here, which a lot of people have had great discussions about it. Where is it? Number 11, the Buddha is within original enlightenment. This is kind of particular thing. Original enlightenment says basically there's nothing to be achieved because you already are enlightened. It's a matter of realizing it. It's not the process of practicing in a linear way or over a period of time or anything that enlightenment can be instantaneous. And that, in a way, is, I think, a lot of what sort of the original intention of Zen practice was. I'm talking about Chinese Zen. It's obviously a lot of people feel much differently about Zen than it used to be, but or not. But the idea that you're basically awakening what already exists, that you already are a Buddha. I had a teacher say, I explained to a teacher, my Zen teacher, I said that in the Nichiren Buddhists believe that you already are a Buddha. You are a Buddha. Everybody in this room is a Buddha. And he said, well, that would be considered so arrogant, you can't say that. You can't say that you're a Buddha.
I thought that was Buddhism 101 saying that.
Doctrinally speaking, it's not. I mean, there is a long history of saying the Buddha was something outside. It isn't you. And even Nichiren Buddhists who follow the high priest in Nichiren Shoshu, the high priest is the Buddha, and you're not a Buddha. You're a follower of the Buddha, which isn't the same, which to me is just ridiculous. But the idea that you're still you're seeking from within something. You're not seeking things like esoterically out there. It comes from within. I draw upon who knows how many past lives. I don't know. Who am I to say whether I had one or not? I'm looking for any available information. And it's like going to the paint store and looking at all the colors and say, but I only like blue. This is my only color. I'll take anything in this blue category. But then being available, saying, okay, well, maybe I could like yellow, maybe I could like green, maybe I'll try a little color swatch. And that's, to me, the kind of, it's still my ultimate reality, if you can use that word. Yes?
For me, in listening to all this, for me the analogy of a fish in water seems very appropriate, that a fish has an intellect that seems not to be sufficient to understand that it is in water, what water is about, what controls the temperature of the water, what controls the salinity of the water, the source of food in the water, but somehow exists in the flow of things. And that every religion seems to try to be explaining or help us guide us to understanding what the water is about. And I think the idea of surrender to the fact that we are in a current, that we are in a flow, that we are in water, and not try to understand it, because I don't think our intellect is sufficient to understand it, makes it easier. We let go of some attachment to ego, attachment to lots of things, which is more experience. I can't say I'm able to do that every minute of the day, but when I have those moments, they're a treasure.
Or they come from something like listening to a beautiful piece of music or something where you're not really aware of what's going on other than that the feeling that it brings about. I think that's totally true. I think, for me, in trying to describe philosophically what is important to me has been really good. It's actually informed my practice more. And I can feel more, in my experience, I can feel more appreciation for not only what I consider, Nichiren, what he was trying to teach people. And that, to me, it helps me want to share it more with other people, too. That's an important aspect of, I think, our practice is really sharing with other people. I'm seeing hands all over the place. Okay, Snake first and then you.
You were talking about if you could reduce it all to one thing.
Oh, don't ask me. You're not going to ask me, are you?
I'm telling you what it seems to be coming toward me as being, and that is something that along the lines of you have to learn to live with paradox, the paradox of duality and non-duality. And you see it here in your own listing, it says earthly desires is enlightenment, number 8. Then you get to number 11 and it says you're fettered by earthly desires.
Exactly.
It's both a blessing and a curse, because without it we couldn't go forward and there'd be no movement.
Yeah, everything is always in a state of change or conflict.
I've particularly seen that with regard to my parents. I went through teenage revolt too. But, now as I become them and realize that they were really teaching me by saying, we can't give you everything, Any child who has perfect parents is unprepared for the world at large because the world isn't perfect. They're going to have to, struggle themselves. Parents can't eliminate that struggle.
Right. You're right. And you, okay. What's your name again?
Howard.
Hi, Howard. It's your turn.
I like you.
Yeah?
I'm you.
Okay. You, sir. With the puka shells or whatever.
Bone.
Oh, sorry. No. So, Howard, you were going to say something?
I was. I'm trying to formulate these thoughts.
Uh-oh.
Not after this.
Well, we know you've spent time away from San Francisco because you're brown. You've been tanning your bod somewhere. Anyway.
I've been doing that.
Okay,
Yeah.
So anyway, you were saying.
I do home repair. A trade. So if you have any business,
Okay.
call me afterwards.
I'm a lesbian. I do my own home repairs. I have a wrench and I know how to use it. But anyway. I think that was meant as some other. But anyway.
I'm a gay man. You might teach me something.
Oh, baby. Is this thing on? You can edit that out, can't you?
Yeah.
Yes, dear.
I'm a student and product of the 16th century Reformation. I was a Lutheran minister for 12 years. And when I hear you talk about the Nichiren Buddhism, I hear him as a reformer.
Yeah, he was.
And central to the Reformation, of course, was eliminating the middleman. That people had direct access to the divine.
Was that not Martin Luther all the way around the
Martin
block?
Luther, all the way through. And of course it had dramatic political, economic, and social consequences that had impacted the world. Because of course, well, that's a whole other subject. And it's just one of the things that I appreciate about your reflections is that you see, and I hear in your reflections, that Reformation is a natural part of the spiritual process. That we're taking on things and we need to let go of things because the very phenomena that we find some truth in can and will become by its nature a curse. And the ritual becomes more important than the source out of which the ritual developed. And I hear, your openness to that. And it's one of the things I appreciate about Gay Buddhist Fellowship is kind of an eclectic openness to spirituality from a Buddhist perspective, but the openness is clearly there. And so I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. You can come see my rich collection anytime.
I need to borrow some.
No, baby. Yes.
Hi, my name's Ed.
Hi, Ed.
And
That's my dad's name, but please, if I get up and come over there and start strangling you, you'll know why. No,
I appreciate your sharing about the effects of chanting. I had an experience at the age of 28 of being in this yoga center where I just sat down and listened to this long Sanskrit chant. As I was sitting there, just these tears streaming down my face, even though I had no understanding what they were chanting about. And it just opened me, opened my heart up. And I later, and that was one thing that drew me to this group, which I became part of for many years. And I just want to share my experience with chanting was that either it had that part of being joyous kind of effect, or it sort of, I'd be letting go of some sort of garbage, unconscious stuff. And more recently I've become drawn to the Zen teacher. And there's no chanting in that group. And I've been realizing lately I miss it. So I'm putting my chanting tapes on. And sort of getting back into that. I'll give myself permission to feel that sort of joy. And I'm a very mental person, so that kind of balances my psyche out a little bit more. So I was wondering if you had any comments about. So what do you think that source of joy is? Is it the actual effect of the mantras?
For me, it's like a kind of the limbic system, sort of it's like a sort of a very primordial kind of remembrance for me. I'll say for myself, because who knows? We probably were essences of ourselves were around the universe at the time when these chants were transcribed, when they were first recited and then transcribed. And the portion of the Lotus Sutra that we do every day, twice a day, it's portions of 2 chapters. And I feel a sense of remembrance. It's a weird kind of appreciation for for time and context, and that somebody had the thought to put this down that I can do, and maybe I was there and helped them. I don't know. It's kind of an odd thing. If you believe that you've made a bodhisattva vow, which I do, from the remote past, then obviously this is something that I did a long time ago. And to me, it's that kind of cellular remembrance that really evokes a lot of joy in me. I appreciate it, and the fact that we do it very quickly and very rhythmically is just, it's like, okay, this is what I'm set to do today. This is how I'm going to be today. So, and I think, not even knowing, the way we talk about it is you don't need to do it in English in order to get the benefit from it, because this is the language of the Buddhas, if you will. And so when we recite the Lotus Sutra, we recite it the way Nichiren Daishonin did in 13th century Japan. And there are members of our organization in 190 countries now, 190 countries and territories. And so if I go to some place, I went to France, and the people didn't speak English, although I did speak some French, and the head guy there was actually Japanese, and he didn't speak any Japanese either. We all sat down and we chanted, and we spoke the language of the Buddhists at the same time. And there's a real kind of coming together feeling that's really, I think, really incredible when you chant, especially when you chant with other people. I think that, if you can listen to it and chant, that's great, but if you can do it with other people, it's even better, because that's what you're doing. You're communing with a bunch of other Buddhas, whether they consciously know it or not. So, it's noon. We have to stop.
One last minute. On Friday, opened at the Sony Metron, a film made by a little friend of mine called What the Bleep Do We Know? It's a terrible title. It is a brilliant movie. They have attempted to dramatically capture how our internalized affects our experience. Mm-hmm. And it has interviews, it has brilliant animation and a storyline, and it is extremely provocative. I went up to the Ashland Film Festival to see it in April, and we talked about it all weekend long. They sold 100,000 tickets in a month at one theater in Portland, which is why they're getting
it's expanding now
with no distributors. I mean, it has enormous pertinence to what we've been talking about today. The Metron, and I think it's going to open at the Galaxy. We got a miserable review from
That's because they don't get it. They're not kids there.
Is it actually called
What the Bleep? It's actually what the...
Because their working title is What the Fuck Do We Know? And it was
it's got asterisks and question marks in the title, and the shorthand is What the Bleep.
It's really worth everyone's time. And tell your friends.
It's playing at the Metron now?
Now. It opened on Friday.
When? You don't know.
Don't know.
Can I just say one thing about this? Should you have other thoughts that you didn't get to share or questions or whatever, my email and phone number down here at the bottom and actually didn't come out. Please feel free to send me an email. It's Diana_Elrod. Unfortunately, it didn't come out that obvious because of what Word does. Feel free. There's an underscore between the A and the E, which got hidden by the underline.
I've been putting this out on our Yahoo circuit, but I have a reservation to Castro Street there, and I have a fair tent, and I'm not going to be using it for the purpose I plan to. So I keep on saying, guys, if you want to use this so that we can have a GDF present at the Castro Fair, I'm offering you these 90% of what you need to do, but I need a little 10% back as far as participation, volunteers, and interest in setting this up somehow. So far, I've received virtually zero response. A couple people have expressed interest. So it's kind of like a do or die type stage. Either I get some kind of response that they're interested in doing this, or else I'll just try to get my money back. But probably not going to get back and cancel. What's October sometime?
October 3rd.
Yeah. So hopefully some people maybe you can approach me afterwards if you are interested in seeing this through. Otherwise, I'm just going to kill the deal. So put that out.
Wouldn't it need to be like a banner or literature?
Exactly.
It's part of it.
Well, it's not part of it. I mean, a banner or literature is no big deal.
It's not?
It's not. Believe me. I mean, having the expense of the space and having a booth are the big deals. What you're talking about is easily done. But that's my thoughts. So, I know we're basically anti-hierarchical, but sometimes we take it to extremes. And I'm just saying, if you want this opportunity, fine. If I don't get a response, then I'll just assume you don't have interested.
Yeah, I endorse the idea. I'm hesitant to make much of a commitment. I go to an hour or something like that. I think a lot of us, I think we are a little bit interested in Glenn Clinton, because enough of us might be a little bit interested in this work, rather than to
yeah, but I don't want something that's border on just 1 inch above apathy as a response. If the interest isn't there, the interest isn't there. I'll respect that. I'm just saying, if the opportunity for what we want to find, if not, that's fine too.
Why don't we just show hands? Is anybody interested?
Okay. All right, fine with it. That's my answer.
There's some water outside for tea, and if you have tea, if you enjoy tea, please wash your cups so there isn't a pile in the sink. And there's a donabo for people who are here for the first time. Contributions are certainly welcome. The typical range is $5 to $20, but you're absolutely welcome, whatever. So please contribute if you can, because this obviously costs us a little money. And if you want to get on the newsletter list, leave your name in the donabo and your email address, and you will get an email version of the newsletter. And I guess the new newsletter comes out next week sometime.
What a segue, because today we are doing newsletter early, so that people today, after the social time, which means people get the newsletter for the month, which is dated. So we have a much reduced number than we have had previous newsletter issues because of a lot of people subscribing online to it. So it's about 150 to do, and if people could volunteer and gather around after, we can make short work of it.
Yeah, and we were scheduled to have a steering committee meeting this week, and I'm sort of volunteered, even though I volunteered by myself to be coordinator of these meetings, and I didn't make a strong enough effort to get it going this month. I had surgery. I made a small effort to have it done instead of another big effort. So I apologize for that. And I noticed that August 8th, also there was some confusion with the management here about the meeting dates, which I thought we had settled about 6 months ago. But anyway, there seems to be a blank on August 8th, which is 2 Sundays from now. So I'm hoping that people who are on the steering committee, I'm trying to get eye contact with them right now, will please show up as well as other people. We need a lot more input. Summer might not be the best. We might not be able to get everybody from the steering committee here this summer. That was one of the problems in July. So we steering committee meeting on August 8th. A regular meeting here. So, any more announcements? Yeah, you want to lead us in on circular closing?
Circular closing. We're doing our usual together. Ooh, I like your shorts. Give them to me.
Right now?
Here we're going to chant Nam Myo Renge Kyo, okay? Nam Myo Renge Kyo. Nam Myo Renge Kyo. Nam Myo Renge Kyo. Nicely done. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.